May 2nd, 1957, 3:14 a.m. The phone rang in Bumpy Johnson's bedroom at Small's Paradise. Nobody called that number at 3 in the morning unless someone was dead or about to be. Bumpy picked up. No hello, just listening. The voice on the other end was shaking, controlled, but shaking. "Mr. Johnson, this is Frank Costello. I need your help." Bumpy sat up. Frank Costello, the Prime Minister of the underworld, the man who controlled judges, politicians, unions, and half the police force in New York. The most powerful Italian mobster in America was calling a black man from Harlem at 3 in the morning asking for help. Something was very wrong. "I'm listening," Bumpy said. "Vito shot me tonight, outside my apartment building. I survived, but he won't stop. He wants me dead, and he wants my seat on the commission. I need somewhere to hide, somewhere he won't look, somewhere he can't touch." Bumpy was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he said the words that would change the balance of power in the American Mafia forever. "Come to Harlem. You'll be safe here." What nobody understood, not the 5 families, not the FBI, not even Frank Costello himself, was that when the most powerful mobster in America asked Bumpy Johnson for protection, it wasn't charity, it was chess. And by the time the sun rose on May 3rd, Bumpy Johnson would become the first black man to sit at a commission meeting, broker peace between warring mob families, and prove that real power doesn't come from bullets. It comes from being the one man everyone needs. To understand what happened the night Frank Costello called Bumpy Johnson, you need to understand who Frank Costello was in 1957. Born Francesco Castiglia in Calabria, Italy, came to New York as a child, built an empire that made Al Capone look like a street thug. Costello didn't just run rackets. He owned the system. Judges took his money. Politicians cleared his name. Police captains warned him before raids. He controlled slot machines, bookmaking, unions, and construction contracts across 5 states. By the 1950s, he was the de facto boss of the Luciano family after Lucky got deported in 1946. But Costello had a problem. His style was political, quiet. He believed in bribes over bullets, negotiations over violence. That made him rich. That made him powerful. But it also made him vulnerable. Because there was a man in his own family who believed power came from fear. Vito Genovese. Vito Genovese was everything Frank Costello wasn't: brutal, ambitious, ruthless. He'd fled to Italy in 1937 to avoid a murder charge, came back in 1945 after the war, and spent the next 12 years watching Frank Costello get richer while he did the dirty work. By 1957, Genovese had had enough. He wanted Costello's seat on the commission. He wanted control of the Luciano family, and he was willing to kill anyone in his way. April 1957, Genovese started making moves, reached out to other families, tested loyalties, made alliances. Frank Costello knew what was coming. He'd been in the mob long enough to recognize the signs. A boss doesn't consolidate power unless he's planning a coup. On May 2nd, 1957, at 10:55 p.m., Frank Costello walked into the lobby of his apartment building at 115 Central Park West. A man in a fedora stepped out of the shadows and said, "This is for you, Frank." Then he pulled a .38 revolver and fired. The bullet grazed Costello's skull. Blood poured down his face. He collapsed. The shooter ran. Doorman called an ambulance. Costello survived, but barely. The bullet had come within an inch of killing him. Doctors at Roosevelt Hospital stitched him up, told him he was lucky to be alive. Costello didn't feel lucky. He felt hunted, Because Vito Genovese had just declared war, and the next bullet wouldn't miss. That's when Frank Costello made the call. Not to his soldiers, not to his capos, not to the other families, to Bumpy Johnson. Because Frank Costello understood something most mobsters didn't. In New York, there were territories the Italians controlled, and there were territories they couldn't touch. Harlem was one of them, not because the mob was afraid of violence, but because Bumpy Johnson had built something in Harlem that no amount of money or muscle could break: loyalty. When Bumpy walked down 125th Street, people nodded. Not out of fear, out of respect, because Bumpy protected his community, and that made Harlem the one place in New York where an Italian mobster on the run could disappear. 3:14 a.m. Bumpy hung up the phone, walked downstairs to his office. Willie Fish Jackson was already there. Night shift, always alert. "Boss, everything okay?" "Frank Costello just called. Vito shot him tonight. He's alive, but barely. He needs a place to hide." Willie's eyes widened. "Frank Costello? The Prime Minister?" "That's the one. And he's coming here? To Harlem?" "If we let him." Willie leaned back. "Boss, you know what this means. If we hide Costello, Genovese is going to see that as an act of war. He could send men, could try to take Harlem." Bumpy smiled. "Genovese won't touch Harlem, because if he does, he starts a war with us while he's fighting Costello. And that's a war he can't win, not while trying to take over the commission." Willie thought about it. "So, by hiding Costello, we're protecting ourselves, too." "Exactly. And more than that, Frank Costello is the most connected man in New York. If we protect him now, when he needs us most, we earn his loyalty. And his loyalty means access to judges, politicians, resources, information. This isn't charity, Fish. This is an investment." "Where are we going to hide him?" Bumpy stood up. "The safest place in Harlem, Stephanie St. Clair's old townhouse on Edgecombe Avenue. Nobody knows she still owns it. Nobody would think to look there. And it's fortified. Iron gates, reinforced doors, clear sight lines." Willie nodded. "I'll get it ready. When's he coming?" "Tonight, before sunrise. Tell Junie to pick him up at Roosevelt Hospital. No driver, no tail. Just Junie and one car." Willie left. Bumpy walked to the window, looked out at Harlem sleeping under streetlights, and smiled. Because Frank Costello asking for help wasn't weakness, it was opportunity. 4:37 a.m. Junie Bird pulled up to a service entrance at Roosevelt Hospital, engine running, no lights. Frank Costello walked out in a hospital gown under a long coat, head wrapped in bandages, blood still visible. He got in the back seat, didn't say a word. Junie drove north, through Manhattan, across the border into Harlem, pulled up to 409 Edgecombe Avenue, a 4-story brownstone. Dark, quiet. Bumpy was waiting at the door. Frank Costello climbed the steps, slowly, looked at Bumpy, extended his hand. "Thank you." Bumpy shook it. "Come inside. You're safe here." They walked into the townhouse. Bumpy had prepared the second floor, bedroom, bathroom, food, medical supplies, a secure phone line, everything Costello would need. Frank sat down on the bed, exhausted, in pain, alive. "Vito's going to keep coming," Frank said quietly. "I know. He won't stop until I'm dead or I give up the commission seat." "I know that too." Frank looked at Bumpy. "So why are you helping me? You could have said no, stayed out of it. This isn't your fight." Bumpy sat down in the chair across from the bed. "Because, Mr. Costello, this stopped being just your fight the moment Genovese decided bullets were the answer. If he wins by killing you, He proves that violence is the only way to settle disputes in the commission. And if that becomes the rule, every ambitious soldier in New York is going to start shooting their way to the top. That's bad for business, bad for the city, bad for Harlem. Frank studied him. You're thinking long-term. Always. And what do you want in return? Bumpy smiled. Right now? Nothing. You're my guest. You heal, you think, and when you're ready, we'll figure out how to end this without more bloodshed. Frank Costello leaned back. For the first time in hours, he felt safe. You're not what I expected, Mr. Johnson. What did you expect? A gangster. Turns out you're a strategist. Bumpy stood up. In Harlem, we're both. May 3rd, May 21st, 1957. Frank Costello stayed in Harlem for 19 days. During that time, Vito Genovese tore through Manhattan looking for him, raided safe houses, questioned soldiers, threatened capos. Nobody talked, because nobody knew. The Prime Minister had vanished, and the longer Costello stayed hidden, the weaker Genovese looked. Bumpy visited Frank every evening. They talked, not just about the war with Genovese, about everything, politics, judges, the commission, how organized crime worked, how power shifted. And slowly, Bumpy began to understand how the 5 families operated, who owed favors, who held grudges, who could be persuaded. And Frank Costello began to see Bumpy Johnson differently, not as a Harlem racketeer, but as an equal. May 15th, 1 week into hiding, Frank asked Bumpy a question. If I stepped down, gave Genovese what he wants, would that end this? Bumpy shook his head. Genovese doesn't just want your seat, he wants you dead. Because as long as you're alive, you're a threat. Stepping down doesn't save you, it just makes you easier to kill. Then what do I do? You broker peace, but not with Genovese, with the commission. Frank frowned. The commission won't meet while there's internal family war. That's the rule. Then we change the rule, Bumpy said. You call a meeting, emergency session. You bring every boss to the table, and you make them choose Genovese's violence or Costello's stability. Force the vote. They'll side with whoever looks stronger. Exactly. So we make you look stronger. How? Bumpy leaned forward. You walk into that meeting alive, healthy, unafraid, with me standing next to you. Frank's eyes widened. You? Me. The man Genovese couldn't find you through. The man who protected you for 3 weeks while Genovese tore New York apart looking. That sends a message. Costello has allies. Genovese doesn't even understand. Frank was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled. You want a seat at the commission meeting. I want them to see that power doesn't stop at Italian borders, that if they want peace in this city, they need to respect all the territories, including Harlem. Frank stood up, extended his hand. Deal. May 22nd, 1957. Frank Costello made calls, secure lines, coded language. Within 24 hours, the commission agreed to meet. Emergency session. Rare, dangerous, but necessary. The location, a private room at Consiglio's restaurant in Little Italy. Neutral ground. The attendees, Tommy Lucchese, Lucchese family. Albert Anastasia, Gambino family acting boss. Joe Bonanno, Bonanno family. Joe Profaci, Profaci family. And Vito Genovese, Luciano family underboss. Frank Costello would represent himself, and he was bringing a guest. May 24th, 7 p.m. Bumpy Johnson walked into Consiglio's restaurant wearing a tailored black suit and fedora. No weapon, no backup visible. Just confidence. Frank Costello walked beside him, head bandage gone, scar visible, but alive, strong. The restaurant went silent. Every soldier, every capo, every boss turned and stared, because a black man had just walked into a commission meeting, and nobody had stopped him. They walked to the private room in the back. The 5 bosses were already seated. Tommy Lucchese at the head of the table, Albert Anastasia to his right, Joe Bonanno and Joe Profaci on the left, and Vito Genovese at the far end. His face went white when he saw Frank Costello alive, then red when he saw Bumpy Johnson. "What the hell is this?" Genovese stood up. "This is a commission meeting, family only." Frank Costello sat down, gestured for Bumpy to take the empty chair beside him. Bumpy sat, calm, unbothered. "Mr. Johnson is here as my guest," Frank said evenly. "He has something to say that concerns all of us." "He's not family," Genovese shouted. "He's not even Italian." Tommy Lucchese held up a hand. "Vito, sit down. Let's hear what Frank has to say." Genovese glared at Bumpy, then sat. Frank Costello looked around the table. 3 weeks ago, Vito tried to kill me. The bullet missed. I survived. And for the past 19 days, I've been in hiding. Not because I was afraid, but because I was thinking about this family, about this commission, about what kind of men we want to be. He pointed at Genovese. "Vito believes power comes from fear, from bullets, from eliminating anyone who stands in his way. That's his vision for the Luciano family. That's his vision for this commission." He pointed at himself. "I believe power comes from stability, from alliances, from building systems that last longer than any one man. That's why I'm still alive. Because when Vito came for me, I didn't run to the other families. I ran to someone Vito couldn't touch, someone who operates outside our world but understands it better than most of us. I ran to Bumpy Johnson." Bumpy spoke for the first time. "Gentlemen, I'm here because Mr. Costello asked for my help, and I gave it, not because I owe him, but because I understand that when wars start at the top, people die at the bottom. Soldiers, families, innocent people. In Harlem, we've seen what mob wars do to communities. We don't want it. You shouldn't either." Vito Genovese laughed. "You think we care what happens in Harlem?" Bumpy's voice went cold. "I think you should, because Harlem is the biggest untapped market in New York. Numbers, clubs, real estate, unions. You want to grow your operations, you need us. But you'll never have us if you keep treating this city like a battlefield." Tommy Lucchese leaned forward. "What are you proposing?" "Simple," Bumpy said. "Frank steps down from day-to-day operations. Vito gets the seat he wants. But Frank stays alive, retires with dignity, keeps his legitimate businesses. And you all agree to one rule: no more internal family hits without commission approval. You want someone dead, you bring it to the table. You vote. Majority rules. That's stability." The room was silent. Albert Anastasia spoke. "And what do you get out of this, Mr. Johnson?" Bumpy smiled. "Recognition that Harlem is an independent territory, that any deals involving black neighborhoods come through me. No soldiers on my streets without permission, no rackets without negotiation. I'm not asking to join the commission, I'm asking to be respected by it." Vito Genovese slammed his fist on the table. "This is insane. We don't negotiate with—" "With who?" Bumpy interrupted. His voice was steel. "Say it, Vito. Say what you really think, and then explain to these men why you're willing to start a war with Harlem while you're trying to consolidate power. Because I promise you, if you come for Frank again, you'll have to go through me. And I don't fight alone." The room went quiet. Tommy Lucchese looked at Joe Bonanno. Bonanno nodded slightly. Lucchese turned to Bumpy. "You make a compelling case, Mr. Johnson. Let's vote. All in favor of Frank Costello stepping down peacefully, Vito Genovese taking his seat, and the new rule about commission approval for internal hits?" 4 hands went up. Lucchese, Bonanno, Profaci, Anastasia. Vito Genovese sat there, furious, but outvoted. "Motion passes," Lucchese said. He turned to Bumpy. "And regarding Harlem, I propose we recognize Mr. Johnson's territory as independent but cooperative. Any business involving Harlem goes through him first." 3 hands went up. Lucchese, Bonanno, Profaci. Anastasia hesitated, then raised his hand. 4-1. Motion passes. Tommy Lucchese stood up, extended his hand to Bumpy. "Welcome to the table, Mr. Johnson, not as a member, but as a partner." Bumpy shook his hand, then shook hands with every boss, except Vito Genovese. Genovese just stared, and Bumpy stared back. May 25th, 1957. The next morning. Word spread through the underworld like wildfire. Frank Costello stepped down. Vito Genovese became boss. But Bumpy Johnson sat at a commission meeting, shook hands with the 5 families, and walked out with something no black man in America had ever gotten: recognition. Frank Costello moved to a quiet estate in New Jersey, retired, lived another 16 years, died peacefully in 1973. He and Bumpy stayed in touch, monthly phone calls, occasional dinners, a friendship born in crisis. Vito Genovese ran the family for 2 years, then got arrested in 1959 on drug charges, died in prison in 1969. Some say the feds got an anonymous tip about his heroin operations. Some say the tip came from someone who knew how the commission worked, someone who'd sat at the table. May 24th, 1957. The night Bumpy Johnson walked into a mob meeting and changed the rules, not with violence, with presence, with the understanding that real power doesn't come from being the biggest. It comes from being the one everyone needs. The story became legend, not just in Harlem, across every family, every crew, every territory. The night the Prime Minister asked a black man for help and got it. The night the 5 families voted to respect Harlem. The night Bumpy Johnson proved that intelligence, loyalty, and strategic thinking could earn a seat at any table, no matter what color you were. Years later, a young John Gotti asked his mentor why the Italians never tried to take Harlem by force. The mentor told him, "Because of Bumpy Johnson, he taught the commission something we'd forgotten, that you don't need to control everything. You just need to make sure nobody can move without you." May the 2nd, 1957. A phone call at 3:14 a.m., a wounded mobster asking for sanctuary, and 19 days that proved respect isn't given, it's earned, one decision at a time. If this story of alliances forged in crisis and power earned through protection hit you different, smash that subscribe button. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson stories that changed organized crime forever. Drop a like if you understand that the smartest move isn't always the most violent. Comment below. Would you have risked hiding Frank Costello, or would you have stayed neutral? Turn on notifications because next time we're telling how Bumpy Johnson refused Vito Genovese's heroin millions and saved an entire generation. You don't want to miss that. Remember, real power doesn't come from fear. It comes from being the one person everyone calls at 3 a.m. when they need help.